I'd like to introduce and bring to the stage now at this time my friend Matthew Marson. He's the head of Smart Places at WSP. Matthew focuses on designing and delivering digital real estate transformation and human-centered Internet of Things technologies within the built environment. Now, Matthew is actually trained as an architect and is a chartered engineer as well, and he was elected as a fellow of the RSA in 2017. That's not one of those spy organizations, is it, Matthew? No, that's something different. Okay, my lack of Englishness is showing there. And he was named as the Institute of Mechanical Engineers Young Visionary for his work in creating the world's most connected building. Matthew sits on the board of SBC's, I said that wrong, didn't I? SBC's? Okay. Intelligent Buildings Group, and is a keynote speaker at many international industry events, and including our own participation in Smart City in Barcelona. Matthew helped us with that. He is a co-author of the Encyclopedia of Sustainable Technologies, and he's going to share with us today 5 things he learned from getting smart wrong. Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks, Bob, before my head gets too big. Afternoon, everyone. My name's Matt, and very simply, my job at WSP is to help our clients look at how they might use technology within like a building, a campus, a city, whatever. And today I wanted to sort of do this presentation because I get a bit fed up at some of the stuff that people talk about when they refer to smart buildings. Some of it I find a little bit disingenuous. So a disclaimer, and I want to say from what I'm going to talk about today, I've had to take the names out, obviously, so I don't get myself in trouble, and to obviously protect their modesty. But the whole point of the presentation was to basically everybody says how wonderful smart is, but nobody tells you about the mistakes they made, because obviously when you do new stuff, the very nature of innovation is that you make mistakes. And I thought, well, sometimes you've got to be the change that you want to see. So I thought I'd give it a go. And to that point, I think this is a fantastic example of some of the false claims and inconsistencies that are acceptable in technology. So on the left, what was that from? 2010, Facebook, Zuckerberg say that the age of privacy is over. Yet only last year, there's a picture of him on the right saying that the future is private. Or this one, I particularly enjoy this one. This is the car that wants to kill you as it does a firmware update. Once you've parked in the garage, it asks you to leave the ignition on for 15 to 20 minutes. Really good, well done. And basically, from a lot of the stuff that we're hearing from some smart buildings vendors out there is that it's all wonderful, it's rainbows, it's VR, in the cloud, big data, AI, etc., etc. So I think there's this sort of expectation that it is a thing that you can buy, it's a silver bullet that will fix all of your business's problems and will make the user experience of the building better than ever. When in fact, there are lots of pitfalls, things go wrong, the change management of how people have to deal with a set of tech in a place just means it's more like that ogre than it is the unicorn. So in this presentation, I've got sort of 6 stories that I wanted to share with you briefly of when I've messed it up. So my first story, without further ado, is called Crotch Cam Doesn't Build Trust. So the brief that we'd had from the client here was that they thought the office was a bit tired and dated, and they wanted to basically do something about it. That they'd read a lot online about activity-based working, and that somebody having a desk and not enough meeting rooms or places to do collaboration just meant they had to do something about it. And in order to make the decision about the split that they needed between those different work settings, they wanted to use some under-desk sensors so that they had the data that they needed, basically to make the decision as to what percentages of those different things were about right. And the idea was that we didn't want to disrupt anybody's working habits or behaviors. It was supposed to be quite subtle, all above board, so we decided to install the sensors of a weekend, not make much of a fuss about it. We were going to collect the data over a period of 3 months and see what happened. And when people discovered them, and they sort of looked like this. It caused quite the outrage. Some were describing it as a corporate scale upskirting, which was certainly not the case. It had the best of intentions. So what I'd learned from that was be upfront about why you're doing something, like they're your employees. If it matters to you as a company, then it should matter to them as well. You should share your data. Again, the project is important. There must be something that you can share about what's going on. People like to be involved with their workplaces. And finally, don't hide the sensor. The whole point of it was to be subtle and not to disrupt people, but it just felt a little bit weird and a bit sneaky. It wasn't there to compare the size of people's packages. Which brings me to my next story around how data should be processed in certain systems. We were fitting out a building with a smart lighting system. And the whole idea here was that we wanted to collect everything that you could imagine from the sensors that it had. It was going to do daylight harvesting, so every luminaire was individually controlled depending on the position of the sun. You could check temperatures. We knew the circulation paths that people were walking. So the idea was that we could get them to mix better and show them real-time space usage. So I'm a cool thing. Let's go to the third floor, type use cases. And so we embarked on using a startup in the country that we were in, and it was supposed to be this really nice goodwill story that big company has helped little one by installing a smart lighting system. And we'd had a very nice letter written from a famous technology company who had used it in one of their data centers before, that basically said it's fantastic and we'd be idiots not to use it. And for us, that meant that it was no longer on the bleeding edge, but was a little bit further back, the scabby edge of technology, if you like, and that we were much more comfortable with. So we went ahead. We installed it. We spent a few million euros to do so, and we were promised this as an architecture. So a set of luminaires would basically communicate to a gateway, which would collect all of that data, just the one gateway, and then it would go to the cloud, where it would answer all of the questions that we ever had about our space. So when we came to turn on the sort of 3,000 light bulbs, this happened. And we didn't get anything from it. And rather stupidly, we were in a position whereby we were so confident in the system that we didn't even have light switches. So we couldn't turn the lights on or off, never mind get any of the extra data. So we were sort of stuck in a pickle. We had 500 people that were moving into the building in 2 weeks' time, and a couple of million euros worth of junk up in the ceiling. So we didn't have time to refit, nor the capital, if we're being honest, in order to put in a normal lighting solution. So we had to chuck about $500,000 at it and work with the startup to re-architect their solution, which looked a bit more like this. We distributed the load across different gateways so that it was like a 1-to-10 sort of ratio. We then had to use some sort of beefy server to do all the number crunching locally, put it through a sort of switch. In the end, we had to use 3 different cloud services in order to get the data that we wanted. And it was a fundamental redesign of their solution, but we didn't really have much of a choice. So what I've learned from that is that you should always go and see things in action. Talk to the people that are using it on a daily basis, get to the heart of their pain points, what they like about it, what they think could be better. On reflection, I don't know why we didn't build a little simulation to pretend to be about 3,000 lights and chuck it at this gateway to see if it could actually do it. That's a big lesson learnt. And take everything with a pinch of salt. Feeling very burnt from that one. I'm not sure if the bitterness is coming across. My next one is around the reputation of the software and the solutions that you put out there. For this particular client, we were going to make the workplace smart buildings app to end all apps. It was going to do everything. You could see meeting room usage in real time. You could navigate to it. You could find people by skill. It had your digital access pass. It had a whole feed that was integrated into Yammer. And through the testing of all that functionality, it passed perfectly. Functionally, there were absolutely no problems at all. The danger was, if you left it open on your phone, about an hour in, it had sucked all of your juice dry. And that basically meant that there was a lot of distrust around it. To complicate matters then, I suppose, even further, was that the person that was running the content on there had a notification sort of feature. and she would send them out at really weird times of night. So it'd be like, oh, tomorrow's Friday, that means it's free ice cream in the office. But 11 p.m. and it's like, ooh, you're in my pocket, go away. And it meant that people also found it a bit creepy, as well as sort of distrusting it as a mobile app. So sort of what I've learned from that is testing beyond the normal test conditions. Be subtle in how you interact with people. I think we're seeing more and more that folks just don't want to deal with digital services that are always screaming at them. This sort of constant vying for attention, and I think we've seen that in some of the inbuilt things that, say, we have in iOS now to look at screen time. This sort of idea of a digital detox. If a digital service, particularly in a smart buildings, is shouty, then it'll probably get deleted. Your content always needs to be fresh when you're doing stuff like this, and most importantly, respect people's boundaries. There's a limit to what you can expect from them in terms of interaction. My next one is around project management styles, because techies and buildings people simply don't understand each other. In the world of technology, you use things like Agile, and in particular one of the most famous methods is Scrum, whereby you bucket things up into a sprint, and it means that you can change the order in which you deliver stuff. Whereas for a person that works in buildings, that doesn't quite work, because obviously you've got to dig the foundations before you put the core in, and then the frame, and then the envelope. So the idea that you can do things in any order that you like doesn't really work for them. And when you've got a delivery timeline on a building that is always late, it means that if you've built a piece of functionality and you need the physical hardware there to test against and it's not there, it's quite good for the software folks because they can change the direction of the thing that they're working on. But if things are on time, then you get this kind of mishmash. I don't know how we solve it. You just need to have I suppose, people spend time together at the pub to iron out some of the situations that arise. My fifth one is around a wayfinding app that we built for what was at the time the world's largest mall. And the client was particularly keen that we used a piece of technology that they'd seen in an office before. So the idea was that it was a set of Bluetooth beacons and a mobile app that were to help you if you needed directions between TK Maxx and Boots to get to those places, because the way that their shopping centre had grown up, it was kind of lots of different add-ons, and it meant it was very difficult for people to navigate, so they thought that this was the solution, but they'd only ever seen it applied in an office situation before. And it turns out there's a reason for that. Bluetooth over kind of double height spaces and a lot of glass gets a bit weird, it's a bit bouncy, so when you're kind of looking at your app, you jump between places quite a lot depending on how those signals have sort of interacted with each other. And it basically meant that rather than trying to help you find your way, it was very successful at getting you lost. To exacerbate matters more, they were very keen and were sort of pushing the deadline really hard on this, so there was lots of publicity about the day that the app was going to go live, which meant we couldn't really do any proper testing to get to the heart of the issue. So we ended up having to release an app that really wasn't fit for purpose and just didn't basically work. So what I'd learned from that would be to work out why the piece of technology that you're trying to apply hasn't been applied in that context before. There's normally a reason or something that you have to change to make it fit. The second one is make sure that your client knows that you have to test this sort of thing on a safe demographic first so that you can work out what all the bugs are and do something about it. And the third one is have a backup plan. So what we had to do for this one in the short term, until we'd resolved some of the Bluetooth signal issues, was in cases where the difference in your position had exceeded a threshold that we'd set, we then went to like a kind of animation version of it and kind of guessed where you were and the route that you should have taken in order to do it. Not ideal, but it got us through in the short term. And then my last one, I kind of want to call it, it's going to be okay, hun? And I love this quote here. It says, expectations around how people's personal data is and how much that's worth has become falsely inflated. And the mystery surrounding how it is used became a cause for concern. And normally when you talk about lots of smart building stuff, some bright spark will go, oh, but what about privacy? Have you considered GDPR? And in cases where you can make it compliant, and it's very possible, there's always this concern that people don't quite trust what it's about. And it's how you message that and deal with the policies that is the difference between success and failure in these sorts of smart building services. So my advice would be, in the first step, get over yourself. No one cares about you and your data. Number two, I'd say expect the worst. In the same way that I haven't left my flat in London open today, is because I expect somebody to rob it, so I locked it. I should think the same about my data. And thirdly, think big picture. Data of populations is valuable of an individual, particularly in a workplace. Like, no one cares how long you spent on the loo. I don't think there's if a manager has time to look at that sort of stuff, then you probably shouldn't be working for them anyway. So, yeah. We'll start the revolution. So to summarize, my kind of 5 lessons from all of those mistakes together would be to know the difference between cool and creepy. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. So in instances for the wayfinding, when you can find a colleague with a particular skill, if they are in fact in the bathroom, that's a bit weird. They should just maybe disappear off the map in those situations. This idea that for the things that you're designing, nobody really wants notifications. Keep quiet or be ignored, and I think that's probably a golden rule for apps more broadly, not just smart buildings ones. Trust will be everything that makes or breaks how people feel about using your service. So if you are a stadium and you've built a kind of a smart venue app that lets you order hot dogs to your chair and it's got your parking sorted, if you can't be trusted with that data, then nobody will use it. Look beyond the glitter. I think there are a lot of folks out there at the moment that are trying to protect their market position and are effectively rolling the turd in glitter by prefixing their product with the name smart, when all they've really done is kind of put a jazzy UI on the front and the fundamental technology underneath hasn't changed. So I would treat everything with a pinch of salt. And despite all of my cynicism, I do think the technology out there that we're seeing people being developed, finding new use cases for, will change the way that we interact with our spaces, and it's only going to be a good thing, so that we should still dream. To go back to unicorns. If you're interested in any of the stuff that I've spoken about, I've recorded about a set of 30 10-minute conversations with all sorts of leaders across the smart building sphere out there. That's at smartsimplified.com. Otherwise, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. You're the first person to get a clapping ovation in the middle of your speech today, and I think it was because you mentioned the word loo. I don't know. All right, questions for my friend Matthew.
Nearly got away.
Nobody wants to know what he did right instead of wrong? Come on, somebody's got to have. There's a question in the back. Can we have the microphone? There it comes. And please state your name and company.
Hi, Matthew. Alex Manning. I work for a small startup. We do lighting control. We can do all the things that you said didn't work. Would you ever consider working with another company like that again?
With enough due diligence, yes.
Would you like to come and see a project that actually works?
It depends where, but yeah, I could be keen. Thanks.
Hey, how about that?
There we go.
Okay.
That's a free trip, right? Yeah? Orlando, I'm there.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? It was a wonderful presentation. I enjoyed it immensely.
Thank you.
Sir.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.